Welcome everyone to another community tips and tricks session. Today I've invited Christoph Neumüller, and as you can already see on the screen here, there's some cool stuff that is happening in our open source space on GitHub, a new command line tool. But without further ado, I want to just pass it over to Christoph, because Christoph is one of our core engineers and he tried to solve a problem by building a new tool. And I'm pretty sure it has something to do with automation, but also with AI, because that's the big hype today. Christoph, thank you so much for being here. Let us know what you've built and show us how others can use this.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks for having me. So what I've built here is a little command line tool, a CLI for Dynatrace resources, actually, for all the platform resources in Dynatrace that are there: dashboards, notebooks, workflows, SLOs, but also settings and DQL queries. So my motivation for building this was actually AI use case, because I wanted to use a coding AI like GitHub Copilot locally to work on Dynatrace resources. I specifically wanted to work on a workflow, a Dynatrace workflow, which, as you know, Andy, that's an object in Dynatrace. It's defined by a JSON file, and it's a graph of steps to execute stuff. I wanted to AI generate this, and I was rather successful actually by giving it some examples. It generated the right JSON, but I couldn't easily automatically upload it, run it, test it, and debug it, like feedback the error messages that it would have maybe back to my coding AI. So that's why I thought, a command line tool would simplify that. So we have REST APIs for this, for all of that, but they are just, if you wanna, if AI wants to use the REST APIs, it needs all the stuff. It needs to know the right context. It needs to have the token. It needs to know how the REST API works and so on. I wanted to take this complexity away from my AI and say, here is a simple command line tool that can just manage Dynatrace resources. And that's when I started to work on Dynatrace dtctl.
Cool. And it's like, obviously the name is also kind of aligned a little bit with kubectl or kubectl, the convenience of having a command line tool, as you say, to explore, but also to modify objects. In our Dynatrace use case, this is our settings, workflows, notebooks, dashboards. And then with this, making it easier accessible also for an AI to automate on top of this. Cool. So folks, as you can see here, it's on GitHub. The link will also be in the description of the video. So we will definitely make sure that you get all the resources. But now, Christoph, just show us a couple of things, get people excited on what they can do.
All right. Maybe let's first look at the directory where I am. I have here a little file called dtctl, and that contains my context, like to which tenant am I connecting. You can also see this by saying dtctl config get contexts. It says I'm connected to this tenant here, right, with a certain permission set. And now let's do this. Let's do get. And if I if I tap, it even has autocomplete support, so I can see what's all there. And let's go to, let's say, dashboards. And this get request would just use our REST API and print out everything. There's little convenience features in the command line tool that the REST API wouldn't have. Like I can say --mine to just see the resources that are assigned to my owner, that I own in Dynatrace. Cool. There's also other verbs like describe, describe db, and let's take this hello world dashboard. db, there's a shortcut for all the things, so it's more convenient to use. And what I can also do, for example, is I can say edit db. Cool. And with this, it would do the following. It would in the background download the file as a YAML file, put it in a temporary location, open an editor where I can manipulate it, and when I save and close, it would upload it again to Dynatrace. And let's just go here and see what this dashboard contains. So we see here the queries in the dashboard and everything, the title. And before I edit here something, let's go over to Dynatrace itself and see this dashboard. Here you see a nice unicorn filled dashboard.
Everybody needs a unicorn, obviously. Yeah.
Obviously. And let's just go back and say here, Andi rocks. And now I save and close this. Now it updated it. And if I go back to Dynatrace, I would see after a refresh that Andi
Cool.
rocks. So
Cool.
it's
So it's really the convenience what people are used to when they're using, for instance, kubectl to edit any Kubernetes resources. You do the same thing now with Dynatrace resources. Very
exactly.
convenient. Yeah. Cool.
Maybe to show off one more thing beyond resources is also queries. So I can also do dtctl query. Let's say fetch logs. You see it fetches the logs, the timestamp status content, and it filters by certain logs that are short enough to fit on the command line. And I say limit 10, so I only want 10. And boom, here I'm getting the 10 latest logs that fit this condition. I can do, let's do 100 to see here a longer list. Or I can say time series. And for time series, I added a little convenience. Like if I say here this, you see we have only numbers. That's on the command line. That's too boring. So I had added a little gimmick that would say dash output chart, and it would render it even like this.
Yeah, looks nice. And as you, I think in the preparation of this call, we also said that in the new or in the MCP server, we now also have an MCP app. So folks, if you are using the Dynatrace MCP server in your VS Code, for instance, you can also get fully interactive charts rendered. But this is obviously still nice to get a little bit of a feeling of what this metric looks like. Yeah.
It's just a little geek nerd feature. Obviously not that useful for high density data and so on.
Hey, Christoph, just one quick thing. Can you do me a favor and do a dtctl help? Because I think you had pretty much everything, right? Really everything that you need. You do we already saw the get, the describe. What other things are out there that you feel is interesting?
I will show exec in a second. That's especially useful for workflow tasks in Dynatrace. You can really run and execute the workflow.
Cool.
Yeah, a couple of others like delete and restore. Like if you delete the resource in Dynatrace, it's in the trash bin and you can restore it again. That's a nice feature. I'm currently working on or there's a contribution ongoing to have OAuth here, so you don't need to get even the token. You can do OAuth authentication and so on. Cool. So really a lot of nice, small little gimmicks that make your life easier.
And as I just mentioned, folks, if you see this and you like it, but you like to extend it, it's an open source project. So please open up a pull request and contribute.
Contributions are very welcome. It's a rather fresh project. It was started 6 weeks ago. So it's in a pretty fresh state. Again, so if you run into bugs or have feature ideas, please contribute. Now, let's look at an AI case, Andi. What do you say?
Yeah. Let's take this to the next level, basically, because I really like the convenience of it as a human. But the question is, how can this now enable our agentic AIs to also be more efficient with managing Dynatrace configuration, I guess?
Exactly. So I'm switching over to VS Code. And just see, here I'm in the terminal of VS Code. So I can do here exactly the same things, right? So same thing. I'm in a directory and I already have a workflow downloaded. But maybe just to show, oops. So this workflow is a very simple, stupid workflow. It queries the number of Kubernetes pods and sends me an email about that number. It's completely boring. It would say here, this is the DQL query for getting the pod count. And then it would, through a small JavaScript snippet format, kind of produce the email body and then send it off. Let's also look at this workflow in Dynatrace. So that's it. There's a manual trigger or an on-demand trigger. Here's this query. Here's the preparation for the email body. Completely relatively unexciting.
Yeah, basic but still useful. But you're right. I mean, there's definitely an option to improve this probably.
Exactly. It can run and so on. Now, let's make it a little more interesting. And for that, what I want to add here is this. Give me a second to copy paste my prompt for that. So here it comes. So I'm back in VS Code here, and I'll use GitHub Copilot. Good. So the prompt that we are using is this: change the workflow. It should list the pods in the report. So it should list all the pods, and per pod should include their respective node tolerations. So that's a Kubernetes concept, but that's on node level, not on pod level. So it's a little challenging maybe. So let's see what AI does here. Now first, it runs an exploratory query. It says dtctl query fetch Smartscapes nodes. So it will find out the nodes in this environment. Let's see. Now I can see the structure. So it had to try a couple of times, but now it figured it out. It now figures out the actual query about passing the node tolerations out. Perfect, the query works. So that's already useful to use dtctl for just running queries. Of course, you can also use the Dynatrace MCP server for running queries. That's kind of equivalent. I wouldn't say the one or other is better. It's just different approaches. But dtctl can do it as well. Maybe one advantage of dtctl in that regard is you can manage multiple environments in dtctl. Like you can have 3 or 10 or 30 different backends, environments, Dynatrace environments, and you can switch between them by saying use context and then use a different one.
That's cool, yeah. Like we do with kubectl, you switch the context, you can do the same thing here, yeah.
It's exactly the same, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see how far it already got. So it's now applying. So it changed already the workflow, and we can see it here now that it changed some things. Let's see, it changed the query. You say it says Smartscape nodes, pods, Kubernetes pods, and then passes the Kubernetes object, finds certain information, including the tolerations.
Cool.
Yes. And what it also did, it changed the email body. And you see here, it has a quite larger JavaScript snippet that kind of builds up the email template. And what it then did is ran, where is it? dtctl apply. No.
Updating the workflow, I guess, right? It was up there, yeah. Oh, it's
executing. Where was it? I didn't see it.
Updating.
Workflow, yeah. dtctl apply -f workflow YAML. So the apply command, I didn't show it before, but what it does is it figures out what kind of resource is in the file and then uses the right Dynatrace REST API to upload and update the resource.
That's cool.
Was successfully applied. Let me execute it then, and then it ran dtctl exec workflow. So here's the ID of the workflow, and now the workflow runs. So instead of me clicking the button in the UI, you can do it through dtctl. What it then did is describe. So with describe, you can see it ongoing. You can see the tasks. Maybe we can even briefly copy that and see for ourselves, because I think it's pretty nice. Describe the workflow. So what we see here is this is the workflow ID, blah, blah, blah. It already states succeeded, and these are the 3 tasks with their durations and their success date.
Wow. So that basically goes into the last execution even and really gives me all the details about every task in the workflow. Wow.
Yes, so this is the execution ID.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Exactly. Now what it did here also, and maybe also let's see this, it checked the logs of the workflow execution. So we can see dtctl logs workflow execution with this. And what it would do is it would summarize, or it would list all the task logs of the workflow execution you see here. So, and that's super helpful to debug. If there's an error, of course, obviously it checks that, it can fix and reapply. And this is exactly the closed loop I wanted to achieve for workflow development.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, this is also how I as a human typically go about it, right? You start a workflow, you make changes, you do a dry run, you figure out where it fails, what it does by looking into the logs, into the execution. And so now you make all of this data available to your AI so that the AI can do the same thing, basically, right? It's a little bit of trial and error, but that's something, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So I don't know why it says here, but was blocked, because it obviously it worked. So I'm a bit confused by this message, but it seemed to have worked. So in the result, it gives me a summary what it did, and I can also nicely, that's as a developer, I like this as well. I can exactly see in a Git diff what it did.
Yeah.
So I can double check and so on.
That's cool.
All right, so now let's look over into Dynatrace again and refresh this. Yeah. And here we see the updated workflow, right? It gets here the node tolerations. It prepares here this email. And it even executed 4 minutes ago.
Yeah.
That's exactly the automated execution. And we can see here what is the content of the email. It says 141 pods, and for each pod, what are the node tolerations?
Oh, that's cool. Really impressive. And obviously, this is just one use case of many. It's really about managing Dynatrace configuration using AI. I think this is extremely powerful for your observability team, for your site reliability engineering team. There's obviously many different teams that can benefit from this, especially as we're going into AI. Now, you mentioned also there's definitely a little bit of a trying to figure out where does this make more sense, where does the MCP server make more sense. This here gives very clear and easy access to all type of configuration in Dynatrace, right? And I think the MCP server was more targeted towards pulling data in, so your queries, your charts, but this is really more focused on automating the configuration aspects of observability.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to get started, have a look. And especially I can recommend the Quick Start Guide, which is a quite extensive Quick Start Guide, but it contains all the things that are supported. We looked at workflows and dashboards now, and DQL queries, but you can see it also manages SLOs, Grail buckets, even Grail lookup tables.
Lookup tables is great, yeah. Open pipeline.
Pipeline configs, settings in general, apps. So this is interesting too. Let's look here. This is powerful. So if you deploy an app in Dynatrace, it can have also serverless functions, and with dtctl you can execute them. Again, that's a REST API feature, but I've kind of made it convenient through dtctl. So I can say, where's a good example? Exec, send email like this, right? Or if you have a Jira connector, you can create a Jira ticket through the Dynatrace,
so you provided a way to execute all of these functions that are typically accessible in a Dynatrace workflow as a Dynatrace workflow step. So these are all Dynatrace apps that are exposing a certain function.
That are apps that are exposing a function, yes. And again, there's nothing new here. This is all standard Dynatrace REST that has existed for a longer time.
Yeah, but I know you make it conveniently accessible.
Exactly.
And as you mentioned earlier, everything has been there. But the question is, did you go through the trouble and look at all of the REST APIs? And now you make it available as people are used to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, Christoph, thank you so much. So to recap, you created this tool out of your own need because you wanted to have a better way of managing Dynatrace configuration, especially connecting it with your coding agents. So this is achieved. It's open source. So folks, you can get all of this on github.com Dynatrace OSS/dtctl. The link will also be in the description of the video. And then open source lives by its contributions. So if anybody is out there that has a new idea, either open up an issue or do a pull request, this is the way we can move this forward.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you, Christoph.
Thank you, Andi.
Bis bald. Servus.
Ciao.